Hello and welcome to this short tutorial video. So today I will show you how you can use the Google dashboards in a combination with the Raspberry Pi Sensehat. As you may know, the Sensehat provides temperature, pressure and humidity sensors. So we will capture data with the Pi, upload it to a Google spreadsheet in your Google Drive, access that spreadsheet data and display it as a dashboard through a web browser. So you can actually see the end result on your screen here. And this is just a cool example of a weather stage simulation, but in principle, you'll be able to reuse this for other application scenarios as well. And the Google APIs are very powerful, but they are very complicated. At least they are for me, definitely. And at times it's not so easy to get you started. So I spent a bit of time researching things and I put everything together so that you might avoid some issues that I had. So what you see here on the screen is a live dashboard that contains 3 charts for temperature, pressure and humidities, and you can apply filters to zoom into specific data. So for example, you can change the temperature filter here. Now I can pull this up and you can see how the charts change. I can change, for example, the pressure as well and the humidity, and you can see how yet again the chart changes. And if I want to zoom into a specific time area, I just click into the time filter box and I will select everything what happens during the first 10 minutes of 11 o'clock or even a single minute, for example. So how do we get to do this? Yeah, just join me for the rest of the video. Thank you for this. Hello and welcome back. Now let's go and see some details of how we can achieve these nice dashboards. So the first thing that you have to do is to log into your Google Drive, and you can do that by simply hitting drive.google.com into the address bar of your browser. And you can then select the New button and create a new Google Sheet. So this Google Sheet will be the sheet where we will capture the data and report the data. First thing we can do is to give it a name, and we can call it, for example, weather data. And the other important thing that you have to notice now is this string in the URL that is highlighted now. That is the spreadsheet ID. Whenever we refer to this spreadsheet and to the data inside of that spreadsheet, we will have to refer to this string. That's very important. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is to SSH into our Raspberry. So simply type SSH pi at your IP address and access your Pi. And make sure that you can forward X11 windows in your Pi. This is not strictly necessary, but it will make things a lot easier. So I'll just do this for you. You will have to create 2 Python scripts now, which I've called testsheet.py and sheetupdate.py. I will provide the links for you guys to download these files at the end of the video. So I've created these files already, and will now open them and walk you through their content very quickly. To access them, we will call Python's IDE idle, so I'll just type idle here, and that will open the IDE window. Here it goes. I will now open the first file, so that's the test sheet file. So here we go. So what is this file all about? So this is the script that we will use to actually capture the Sensehat sensor data. So you can see that we've created the sense object and import the Sensehat software. So that is shown here and here. And so this is of course just an example, and you might have in other projects with other data that you want to capture. But anyway, what you can see here is that we've created a loop and we're iterating 999 times. So for each iteration, we capture the current timestamp, the temperature, the pressure, and humidity. And as you can see, the data is captured as floating point variables, and it's rounded to 2 decimal places. And at the end of each iteration, we wait for a second and start over again. Yeah, but the interesting part of this is, of course, represented in the call of the update_authenticate method that we define in the sheet update script. And that will execute the authentication and update the values in the Google Sheet. So we call this twice, once before the loop here, and for each iteration here. Of course, in order to enable that, we need a few additional variables. So the spreadsheet ID, that's the same ID I mentioned earlier, the range, and the values variable that is represented as dictionary. So we have the range and the values. The range name string describes a range in A1 notation. And the first time we define this range, we will select the first row and the first 4 columns from A to D. So we can see that here. And values is a multi-dimensional array where the 4 column values are specified. And these indicate the timestamp, the temperature, the pressure, and humidity. You can see that here. And as you iterate through your loop every time, you can see that you capture the temperature, pressure, and humidity, and you update timestamp, temperature, pressure, and humidity in your values array, and you also update the range name by adjusting the right row number. We will now look into the other Py script called sheet update. I've opened that already for you. And this file is very similar to the quick starter Py script that you will also find on the Google developers site. And as you can see, this file contains 2 functions, update authenticate and get credentials. Let's have a look at update authenticate first. So first we need the credentials, and so we're going to call the first functions and we create a credentials object. With the credentials that contain the authorization key, we will use an authorize method of the credentials object to apply the necessary credential headers to all the requests made by our httplib2.hdp instance. Now, what we can do is we can build a services object, and based on the data that we've gathered, and we do that with this line of code. So that contains the Google Sheets API, a discovery URL, and the HTTP authorization headers we've received earlier. So we will fire these authorization headers with every request to the Google API. What we can do now is finally we can call the update method and execute on it. That's done here. This will then effectively update the values array and consequently also the sheet. We will now download the client's secret JSON file and enable the Google APIs through the Chromium browser. And we're starting it from the Raspberry Pi interface. So in order for us to start this procedure, we will go to the Google developers site, developers.google.com/siege/quickstart/Python, and we will simply follow the 2 steps that are indicated here. That will enable us to turn the Google Sheets API on and to start the authentication process. So we click on the wizard link to open up the wizard. Yeah, on my Raspberry it does take a little bit of time. So you have to be patient. And we see the first screen come up. And we simply hit continue here. Have to wait a little bit, so a default My Project is created. You can see the little bell here, which is changing color. That means that the system is actually working. Now the APIs are being enabled, and we need to define the credentials that will help us the authentication through the authentication process. So that takes a little bit of time again, and we can cancel here. Let me just create the credentials now. We will request an OAuth client ID so that we will have an interactive URL authentication the first time we want to access the Google APIs. So we will configure the consent screen here. And you can see an email address. That should be your email address. The email address is your Google account email address typically. You can see that here. And you can give whatever name you want to the product name that's shown to the users. That will show up on the interactive authentication screen later on. You just save that result here. Now we select as application type other, and we can call this Sensehat by and create our client secret file, and here it is. So now what we can simply do is to download this file into our Raspberry Pi. Just wait until this happens. Now let's check if our file has been downloaded, and you can see this here. Let's move into this directory, into the downloads directory, and let's rename this file to client underscore secret as has been requested. I just remove all these strings here, and this file needs to be moved into the working directory where the other Python scripts are located. So I've created under documents a Python folder, and under that a Sensehat folder, and my Python files are there. So let's move this client secret.json to that directory. So So we have to go back to the documents folder and the Python folder and the Sensehat folder. Okay, now I've done that. Let's see what is inside that directory. And you can see that all of our files are here. We will now follow step 2 of the instructions and install the Google Client Library. I've done that already. It's just one command. It's the pip install command you see here. Just make sure that you add sudo in front of this and it should install. Let's see if everything is working correctly now. Let's just double check the spreadsheet ID from one last time. So let's go back to our spreadsheet ID, the Pi weather data sheet, and you can see that the ID ends with F0C, and let's now simply verify whether in our test sheet.py file we have the same. Yeah, this looks exactly the same. So let's start the this script then. Here we go. The browser window pops up, and Sensehat weather data would like to view and manage your spreadsheets in Google Drive, and I will allow that. So the authentication flow is completed here successfully. I just close this window. Come on. And I can see that the credentials have been stored to my home directory now. And if I go to my sheet now, you can see that it's being populated and data is being accumulated here very nicely every few seconds. And we will now build a dashboard. That will be the last step of this tutorial. In order for us to do that, we simply type script.google.com, and that will open an untitled project window, and I will open the existing script already, and you can just copy that, and that will replace this. So I will just open. And I've called it Sensehat data. So this script is written in JavaScript, which is the scripting language used in Google applications in general. So it defines a doGet function, as you can see here, as we want to intercept a user's HTTP GET call to the dashboard. We will return a user interface app object as the result of this function call, and this object will display the dashboard in the user's browser. So if we go down, you can see that I return this object. So initially we have to define a number of variables. The sheet ID, which is our unique reference to our sheet, and it's always the same number. You can see this here with the F0C at the end. An SS variable, which is our spreadsheet application object, and we open that by referring to our sheet ID. And a data object, which is the data that sits inside our sheet. We have a single data range, and with a single method we can capture all of our data. The next thing we're focusing on is a number of filters that we're going to build to filter temperature, pressure, humidity, and to select time. You can see that we are referring to different column indexes here. So we're pointing towards the column that holds the data that is relevant for us. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 0, as you can see here. And that refers exactly to the 4 columns that we are using when referring to our data sheet here. We start counting with 0. Next thing we have to do is to define 3 line charts for the temperature, the pressure, and the humidity. So we build a new line chart. We define a data view definition. We set a title for X and Y, and then we build that chart. We refer to specific columns that holds the data that's of interest to each of the charts. As you can see here, we always have the timestamp as the x-axis and then the relevant data as the y-axis. We now build the actual dashboard, a dashboard object. We're creating a new dashboard panel and set the data table with our data. Then we bind all of our filters and all of our charts to that dashboard, and we build everything. And finally, we have to create the app object that we will return as a result of the doGet function. We create the filter panels, the chart panels, add everything, add some spacing, and add all of these elements to our dashboard. Finally, we return the application. If we now have a look at the data, this continues to be added here, and we can now publish our script and deploy it as a web application. You can give it a version. This is the actual URL that is going to be generated, and you can simply test this here. And you can see how this chart is now built. And as we go along, we can refresh this page. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You will find more information at the link below, and I hope I can see you back soon. Goodbye.